The screen lit up in pulses of red as the sound of sirens echoed through the cold server room. Static hissed through a half-cracked speaker. On a wall-mounted monitor, government servers were crashing, one by one. Fingers moved fast, but not frantic. The air trembled with tension. Smoke from an energy drink spiraled upward beside the terminal. A camera feed blinked out. Another one followed. And then a terminal window filled with lines of code. Unauthorized access. In the shadows, a hooded figure turned. Not surprised. Almost. Waiting. A photo of a teenage boy burned slowly in the trash can. The hacker known as Trace had just been framed. But no one knew it yet. The firewall breach was clean. Too clean. Someone else wanted this blamed on him. A phone buzzed. One message. It read, "She was never supposed to know." And then came the sound, boots pounding up metal stairs. Red lights flashed across his eyes. His breath slowed, but his hands kept coding. Trace wasn't born a hacker. He was made into one by silence, abandonment, and a system that forgot him. Left alone at 14 in a group home buried under concrete bureaucracy, his only escape had been a school library terminal no one used. He taught himself to speak in zeros and ones because no one ever listened to his voice. The world had ignored him, but servers didn't. Systems responded. Passwords obeyed. Firewalls eventually bent to his will. Trace never wanted revenge. He wanted control, something the real world never gave him. But that night, someone took it from him. The breach wasn't just technical, it was personal. Someone used his own signature code to frame him. And that wasn't an accident. That was a message. The alert didn't hit the press immediately, but it hit the agency's war room like a digital nuke. Satellite feeds shifted. Multiple regions went dark. They didn't see Trace. They saw a cyber ghost with a name. Trace became public enemy, Zero Biao. Inside a glass box room, agents barked orders while digital heat maps pulsed across global networks. They didn't ask why the breach was too clean. They didn't question the signature. They just hunted, and they wanted it over by sunrise. Surveillance drones spun in the sky. A voice crackled over the comms. He has no clue. He's already been made. But Trace wasn't running. Not yet. He was decoding the message buried inside the frame. The betrayal wasn't anonymous. It was personal. At exactly 4:03 a.m., Trace stopped typing. His eyes scanned the log again. One line of code didn't belong. It was subtle. An echo string. No random attacker would use it. This was someone he knew. Someone who used to call him brother. Across the world, a different hacker sipped whiskey and watched the same breach unfold on a private feed. He smiled. That smile meant war. The betrayal was set. Trace wasn't just being erased. He was being sacrificed. The final script wasn't about exposure. It was about reputation collapse. And the world would believe it. Unless Trace wrote a new ending before dawn. The door burst open at 4:17 a.m. Boots. Flashlights. Screams. The agents moved like a storm. Trace stood calm, unplugging the hard drive mid-download. He looked one of them in the eye and whispered, "This isn't a hack. It's a warning." A flashbang lit the room. Sound disappeared. Time bent. As they cuffed him, a backup script auto-launched from a nearby laptop. A slow upload began to servers far away. Trace had left a ghost behind. One that would reveal everything. He'd been caught. But he hadn't lost. They put Trace in a holding cell designed for cyber terrorists. Cold steel walls, no signal, no noise. Only a single red camera blinked like a metronome, watching his every breath. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. But his mind never stopped. He replayed the breach in his head again and again, line by line. The frame was elegant. Brutally elegant. The attacker hadn't just copied his code, they'd mimicked his rhythm, his logic flow, his quirks. That took knowledge. Intimate knowledge. It wasn't just someone from his past. It was someone he trusted. The silence gnawed at him. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was knowing that the world would believe it. To them, he was a genius gone rogue. But to Trace, this was a crucifixion built in JavaScript. Back at the agency, they were dissecting his life like an open drive. Every chat, every transaction, every encrypted file. They moved fast, arrogant in their belief they had the villain. But they were only finding what was planted. Each artifact was too perfect, too damning. A crypto wallet traceable to stolen ransomware. A private message thread begging a foreign contact to activate the payload. It was all fiction, but it looked like truth. One analyst, a young woman named Mira, paused. Something didn't sit right. She leaned in, rewatched one breach video frame by frame. A half-second lag. A blink that shouldn't be there. She whispered to herself, "He's not in control." But no one listened. Her gut told her the real hacker was still out there, watching. In the next room, the man who led the arrest, Agent Clive Rhodes, reviewed the footage without emotion. To him, this was justice served. He had hunted digital ghosts for 20 years. He had seen them all. Chaos coders, blackmail artists, data mercenaries. Trace was the youngest, the smartest, the cleanest hit I'd ever landed. But something itched in his mind. This kid didn't run. He didn't plead. He unplugged the drive mid-download like he knew exactly when they'd burst in. And he looked Rhodes straight in the eye. That wasn't panic. That was challenge. Rhodes lit a cigarette, watched the feed again. And in the corner of the screen, barely a flicker, a second screen launched a script the moment Trace was cut. A ghost file. Not Trace's. Someone else had been watching. While the agency dissected evidence, somewhere in Prague, the other hacker, the one behind it all, walked calmly through a neon-drenched alley, phone in hand, earbuds whispering updates from a silent AI assistant. His name was Soren, age 27. Once Trace's mentor, now his executioner. He watched Trace's arrest video in 4K clarity, rewound, smiled. It was working. Trace would take the fall, and Soren's real plan could move forward without eyes on him. He wasn't just hacking networks now. He was hacking perception, making the world believe the lie he fed it. In a city that never slept, Soren disappeared into an unmarked club behind a passworded door. Below it, in catacombs wired with fiber, the true breach had only begun. Trace sat on the cold cell floor, heartbeat finally sensing with the silence. But something pulsed in his mind, his ghost file. He had embedded a subroutine, not to escape, but to ping someone. An old contact, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Their relationship had ended in betrayal. But if anyone could find Soren, it was her. Outside the agency firewall, in a dim co-working space somewhere in Berlin, a secure message pinged across an old terminal. The woman reading it stared in disbelief. The code signature. The timestamp. It was him. The ghost was real. Her name was Raven. Age 25. Hacker turned whistleblower. She opened a hidden directory, slid her chair closer. Whatever had happened to Trace, she knew one thing. If he was reaching out, it was war. Raven hadn't touched the underground scene in 3 years. She'd buried that version of herself, deep beneath layers of freelance security gigs and ethical hacking panels. But Trace's ping didn't just wake her. It dragged her back into a war she'd sworn off. The code wasn't just his signature, it carried a cipher only she could read. A shared protocol they had once used to breach a global telecom back when they were allies. Buried beneath the message, one word. Framed. She didn't ask who. She already knew. Soren. The betrayal was unfinished business. She reopened an old OS partition named Requiem. As her rig came to life, the old glow of rebellion bathed her room. Her fingers hesitated over the keys, then moved. The hunter in her was awake again. And Trace, despite everything, was still family. Soren knew Raven would come. He'd counted on it. In fact, he left a trail for her, carefully placed crumbs of deception, each one seemingly hidden but ultimately designed to guide. His endgame required distraction. Let her chase ghosts while he deployed the real payload. In a data center beneath the club, he watched a simulation of global financial meltdown. Not to trigger it, yet. Just to test it. Every server was compartmentalized, air-gapped. But the code was his. A weapon disguised as a glitch. One that could bankrupt nations in seconds. Trace had been the scapegoat, the warning. But Raven, she would be the insurance. He muttered under his breath, she always needed a reason to return. Now I've given her one. Raven accessed an encrypted relay in Kazakhstan. The logs confirmed it. Soren had spoofed Trace's IP, rerouted it through 5 dead relays, and left just enough breadcrumb noise to draw federal eyes to Trace. But there was more. Hidden in the log's metadata was a code fragment. Not Soren's. Someone else had helped him. That changed everything. Soren never trusted anyone. If he was working with someone, it meant there was a bigger operation. Raven's blood chilled. She pulled up a live feed of the darknet chatter she hadn't seen in years. They were calling it Project Judas. Half the messages were gibberish. The other half were contracts. Big ones. Trace wasn't just framed. He was silenced as part of something global. She whispered, "This isn't about him anymore." Inside the agency, Rhodes was starting to question everything. He reviewed the second script from the ghost file Trace's laptop triggered. It wasn't a leak. It was a breadcrumb trail. A puzzle. Not the work of someone hiding guilt, but someone desperate to be understood. Trace's lines of code were laced with literary references, inside jokes only a few hackers would understand. Rhodes didn't know the language, but he understood obsession. And Trace had coded a message in plain sight. It read, "Judas lives in Prague." He didn't share it with the team. Instead, he opened an old contact sheet, hesitated, then dialed a number he hadn't used in a decade. The voice on the other end answered in static. Rhodes said, "I need Raven." The pieces were moving fast now. Raven connected a call trap to her terminal just as her system flashed incoming relay, Langley. She almost didn't answer, but the voice was unmistakable. Rhodes died. The same man who once hunted her, who once put her face on a list. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask for help. He just said he's not the one. Raven didn't say anything back. She just terminated the call and packed a go bag. Across the world, Trace sat still in his cell, unaware that lines were being redrawn. Allies reawakening. And in Prague, Soren raised a glass to the city lights as the first node of his real plan came online. A pulse of code, silent and devastating, began crawling across the backbone of the internet. Raven landed in Prague, under cover of darkness. No digital footprint. No customs trail. Just the clothes on her back, a burner phone, and the whisper of unfinished loyalty. The city glistened with rain as she slipped through back alleys toward the last IP ping from Soren's servers. She didn't expect what she found. Not a lair. Not a lab. A nursery. Hidden beneath an old chapel, humming with heat from hidden machines, the walls were painted with children's murals. A single crib. A terminal tucked beneath a mobile of stars. And one hard drive labeled Trace. She hesitated. It was bait. But her fingers moved anyway. The drive unlocked with her old cipher. And on screen, a video began. Soren's face. "Come, Daddy. I knew you'd come." He wasn't hiding anymore. He was performing. The video played like a confession, but it wasn't guilt. It was theater. Soren stood before the same wall Raven now faced. He explained everything. The setup, the breach, the signature copied from Trace's earliest college projects. And then, the reveal. Trace's frame wasn't revenge. It was camouflage. The real payload, Soren said, was built inside something no one would ever scan. A childhood learning app. It had already shipped globally. A dormant virus inside bedtime stories, waiting for a single key to awaken. And the key was coded in Trace's DNA. Literally. He needed Trace imprisoned, scanned, sampled, not destroyed, just accessed. The moment he said that, Raven understood. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about evolution. Soren wasn't hacking systems. He was rewriting humanity. Back at the agency, Rhodes barged into the director's office with evidence in hand. The USB Raven had smuggled through a courier contained logs that contradicted every file they used to arrest Trace. But the director didn't blink. He poured coffee, said it doesn't matter. The arrest already validated the budget increase. The threat was real enough for politics. Truth? That's secondary. Rhodes stood still. The silence between them was volcanic. He realized then, they never cared who the hacker really was. They just needed a body to crucify. Trace was a symbol, and symbols could be manipulated. Rhodes walked out without a word. In his gut, the rage burned. Not for Trace. For how many like him had been erased for convenience? In his cell, Trace began to feel it. The shift. Something in the air. Guards no longer stared him down. They avoided eye contact. Something had changed in the command structure. Then came the knock. The cell door creaked. Rhodes entered alone. No gun, no cuffs. Just a simple tablet. He placed it down. Pressed play. Trace watched the footage from Prague. The nursery. The video. The DNA. His breath caught. He whispered, "He used my blood." Rhodes nodded, and then said quietly, "He didn't just frame you. He bred you." Trace's whole body tensed. The breach hadn't started that night. It started the moment he was born. Every system he'd ever cracked had been guiding him toward this moment. And now, he saw it clearly. Soren had built him, trained him, then framed him to unlock him. Outside, the storm hit Prague like judgment. Raven fled the nursery as black SUVs rolled up the hill. They weren't local police. They moved like private contractors, silent, armed, unmarked. She knew she'd been watched. Her extraction route collapsed in minutes. So she did what hackers do. She pivoted, found a basement, hijacked a street-level network, and sent everything she had to a dead-switch server. The rain hammered the city like a countdown. As files uploaded, her hands shook. Not from fear, from fury. This wasn't about Trace anymore. It was about every system, every institution, every illusion. She'd seen it now. The virus wasn't code. It was belief. And she was done hiding. She whispered into the mic, "This ends tonight." The virus woke at 2:17 a.m. UTC. Thousands of bedtime apps across homes in over 90 countries silently pinged the master server. The code pulsed like a heartbeat, slow at first, then faster. Each signal returned a seed string. Trace's DNA. A biological key embedded in data. The reaction wasn't explosive. It was invisible. Financial networks recalibrated. AI systems recalculated threat levels. Border drones changed default behaviors. The world had no idea what was happening, but Soren did. In his hideout, he watched a live visualization, a spiderweb of systems bowing to his command. He whispered, "This is what gods feel like." And yet, behind him, a screen flickered unexpectedly. Raven had breached his firewall, not to stop him but to hijack the signal. Her ghost was in his system. and it was angry. Trace was extracted under cover of a decoy transfer. Rhodes had pulled strings, bent rules, and traded favors that would burn him later. The prison van turned left where protocol said right. The road disappeared into fog, headlights cutting narrow beams through mist. Inside, Trace stared blankly at the reinforced walls until the tablet pinged. A new message. It simply read, "Now." Suddenly, the van braked hard. Doors opened. Raven stood in the rain, soaked and shaking, hand outstretched. Trace stepped out, no words exchanged. They ran, across abandoned lots, into a stolen car, toward the city's backbone. She said quietly, "Soren launched it. We either shut it down tonight, or everything resets tomorrow." Trace finally spoke. "Then we burn the entire code." They reached the core access site, a forgotten Cold War data tunnel beneath Prague. Inside, steel walls stretched like veins beneath the city. Raven's script was ready. Trace had written the countercode. The plan: reroute the virus through abandoned Soviet satellite relays, creating digital noise, severing control, then killing the keystring. But it would mean sacrificing everything: their identities, their tools, their traces. As they prepped, old ghosts surfaced. Trace asked, "Why didn't you turn me in back then?" Raven paused, gaze fixed on the blinking cursor. "Because I was never after justice. I was after him." She clicked enter. The tunnel lights flickered. The code began its march. And above them, the world shivered. Soren saw it. The signal stuttered, then bent. Systems rerouted unexpectedly. He screamed, shattering a monitor with one punch. His AI assistant looped back, confused. External breach. Path anomaly. Virus redirection in progress. He scrambled to sever nodes, but it was too late. Trace's DNA sequence was mutating in real time, becoming unreadable. The key was fracturing, and the more he tried to fix it, the more it spread like entropy. In fury, he activated the final failsafe: thermal overload. He would take everything down, scorch the servers, and let no one win. But in that moment, a secondary screen pulsed. It read, "Hello, Soren. Goodbye, Soren." Raven had written a virus of her own, one that only triggered if he tried to wipe it all. In the tunnel, Trace and Raven felt the wave. Data streams halted. The signal severed. One final pulse ran through the system, then black. Silence. Their terminal shut down on its own. Raven leaned back against the cold wall, eyes closed. Trace just breathed. No cheers. No victory music. Just the hum of ancient wires cooling. Above ground, cities continued. No one knew how close they'd come to collapse. But systems had blinked. Stocks had stuttered. A hint of what could have been. They stood together at sunrise, overlooking the skyline. Trace said he won't stop. Raven answered, "Neither will we." Behind them, the old world kept spinning. But the war had changed, and the ghosts were no longer silent. Soren didn't die. His servers melted, his network collapsed, and his name was scrubbed from every kill switch list. But he didn't die. He vanished. Off-grid. Burned everything, including the shell of the man he used to be. Somewhere in the woods outside Brno, a new machine booted up. Smaller, meaner, colder. He had failed. But failure to him was only iteration. He replayed footage of Trace's countercode on loop, studying every logic trap Raven embedded. His voice rasped across the dark cabin walls. This isn't over. It was never meant to end. He had expected defeat, but he had planned for rebirth. Soren didn't seek revenge now. He sought redesign. And this time, he would use different DNA. Trace didn't go back to hacking. He disappeared into a life without screens, without code, without noise. Somewhere in Norway, beneath towering cliffs and crashing seas, he worked at a dockyard, lifting crates, fixing boats. His eyes held ghosts no one else could see. Every night he stared at a laptop he never opened. The virus had been purged, but the fragments, those seeds, were still alive inside him. Not digital, biological. He wasn't afraid of what they could become. He was afraid of who might come next to harvest them. Trace had one rule now: stay hidden, stay human. But deep down he knew the clock was still ticking. He wasn't done. He was dormant, like thunder waiting under ice. Raven returned to the surface world with a new mission. No interviews, no press, just code, raw, defensive, and dangerous. She built something called MirrorNet, a self-erasing, anti-surveillance operating system. No one knew it was her. It spread like myth, a whisper on every hacker forum, a tool that protected users by disappearing them. But inside its core was a trigger. One line of silent text: if Soren resurfaces, trace the echo. She watched from afar as agencies praised their own containment efforts. Let them have the credit. She never needed recognition. She needed armor. And MirrorNet would be the digital shield for the next generation. For those who still believed that truth shouldn't have to hide. At a secure UN conference months later, the breach was addressed in vague, polished language. A near miss. A valuable learning experience. Officials nodded. Experts discussed AI safeguards. But one analyst, Mira, sat in the back, silent. She had seen the raw footage. She knew the virus hadn't been stopped, just delayed. After the panel, a stranger slipped her a sealed envelope. No words, just a glance. Inside, a small flash drive, engraved with a symbol she hadn't seen before. A raven's wing, fractured. She closed her eyes. Somewhere, a backup node was still live. The fight hadn't ended. It had evolved into silence. A silent war where trust was the first casualty, and memory the last line of defense. Somewhere on a remote satellite node orbiting Earth, a blinking light pulsed, faint, forgotten, untouched by patches or protocols. It was an old Russian relay, never dismantled. Deep within its dusty storage was a packet, not a virus. A voice. Trace's voice. Left behind in a final burst upload as he was dragged out of his lair. It whispered like a ghost into the black. If you're hearing this, the story isn't over. You think this ended with me. It didn't. It never does. Because you can kill a hacker's body, but not his idea. I wasn't the virus. I was the firewall. And now, it's your turn. Somewhere far below, a kid opened a bootleg terminal and saw a blinking message: wake up. The next legacy had begun. In a quiet village near the Swiss border, an old man repaired watches. No network, no cloud, just gears and silence. But one night, a package arrived. No sender, no markings. Inside, a mechanical stopwatch fused with a chip. Embedded deep, code written in a style he hadn't seen in decades. The man blinked. It was Trace's logic structure, but sharper, younger. Someone else had picked up where he left off. He wound the watch, listened to its tick, then placed it on the shelf beside others. Not for sale. A message. Time doesn't forgive. It archives, and sometimes it repeats. He turned the sign on his door to closed and walked to the back room, where a wall of analog terminals waited in sleep mode. In Tokyo, a teenager named Ayumi cracked the final node of MirrorNet without knowing what it was. She had followed patterns, hunted anomalies. She thought it was a game. But when she unlocked the final gate, her screen didn't reward her. It opened a direct channel. Text appeared, line by line. You're not the first. You won't be the last. Then a burst of files flooded her system. Trace's voice logs, Raven's script history, fragments of the virus itself. Her breath caught. This wasn't a puzzle. It was a passing of torch. She saved everything. encrypted it, and looked in the mirror. The fear faded. She whispered, "I see you." Somewhere far away, a silent camera blinked to life. The agency buried the breach under sealed documents and classified terms. The official narrative blamed rogue AI behaviors and outdated protocols. Rhodes submitted his resignation. Not in anger, in exhaustion. He left his badge and gun on the director's desk, walked out without fanfare. Days later, he mailed a package, handwritten notes, diagrams, recordings, to a journalist no one remembered anymore. The story never aired, but it circulated online. A whisper, a leak, a truth with no attribution. But people read it, and some believed. In a world addicted to filters, even the hint of raw signal was rebellion. And that was enough. Because the truth doesn't need a spotlight, just a crack. On a windswept rooftop in Berlin, Raven stared down at the city, the heartbeat of data below her flickering like veins under skin. She lit a cigarette, not for the nicotine, but for the ceremony. Her hands trembled. The world had moved on, but her war hadn't ended. Her systems now ran autonomously, watchdogs coded to flag patterns, names, behaviors. If Soren ever resurfaced even as an idea, she'd know. She didn't crave justice anymore. Just balance. One pulse for every wound. One alert for every lie. As the wind whipped her coat, she whispered into her headset, "Tell the next one they won't be alone." Then she turned, walked away, and let the city lights consume her shadow. And somewhere in a forgotten archive, beneath layers of disconnected servers and deprecated code, a heartbeat looped. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't a firewall. It was Trace. Not the boy. Not the man. The echo. A synthetic rhythm encoded in quantum redundancy. Waiting. Watching. Learning. The system called it a ghost packet. Others called it glitchware. But to those who still believed in the war, it was hope. Because stories like his don't die. They fragment, replicate, evolve. One day, when the world forgets the cost of truth again, he'll return. Not in flesh, but in code. The final message flickers into existence. This isn't a hack. It's a memory. And with that, the frame goes dark.